Good morning from the amazing city of Cusco, Peru. I hope you are all doing well in the beauty and grace of you.
Good morning, lovely people. We are staying at the absolutely incredible Palazzo del Inca Hotel. This is a gorgeous and luxurious hotel with just a short walk to the main tourist sites throughout Cusco, and yet feels like a haven retreat from the bustle of the city. The excellent service and friendly staff add magic to our memorable stay. Asur'Ana and I had issues with this altitude, and they brought us coca, tea, and oxygen. Our meals are exquisitely delicious. Breakfast was outstanding and plentiful, offering traditional and local options. They have a fun tour and cultural presentation every evening to honor the history of the hotel and the local pre-colonial Peruvian culture. We appreciate the fabulous spa. The baby llama that wanders the courtyard is just so adorable. Please relax and enjoy this marvelous webinar.
Thank you for attending the next existential webinar that we're here to explore. Exploring existential existence is a really beautiful thing to do if you want to understand the nature of you, the nature of your reality, the nature of your truth, and the nature of the purpose of your existence. And this is to explore the truth of existential purpose. Any seed is born with a purpose key, and we've searched in dreaming about this webinar for your existential purpose key. Most of you found it, and when it couldn't be found, the Dao of the Seas created one for you. So you all have a purpose key I want you to ring today. There's a second key I want you to ring, which is another powder, a white powder that has adjoined the first four. I'll explain these for those of you working with the truth serum, or the white powder, or the silver powder for hell gates. And there's now a golden powder that's for nature. It connects in the form of what looks like an elephant and is a live action golden white powder. The live action elephant is not meant for humans. It's meant for nature, and it cleans up things that aren't right for the trees or the plants or the tundra. You can also throw them into animals or dogs or pets that you have and see the effect that it has over them. It may make them very calm and peaceful. If you're walking around and there's some barking dogs, try throwing them at it plus their yard and see what happens. It's also a substance you can sprinkle over your garden, and it should make your plant shimmer and grow larger or grow more beautiful. It will do that to the landscape too, and it's a different being of substances with a lot more golden ray in it, or golden energies in it. And so it's very beautiful for the yard or for nature, and you can try them on your house plants too. Asur'Ana did that, and they seem to be doing better. So put an elephant on each house plant and see if it doesn't sparkle more in its own jurisdiction of life. The silver ray, which is in the form of a stuffed dragon, shuts down hell gates and removes them but the new substance is in a key and is to remove sick or ill resources around you. Right now on the planet, there's a lot of ill resources that have shown up due to jurisdiction problems. And sometimes they end up jurisdiction of something you don't want to participate in, or you get advice that is not well, that perhaps you can't hear entirely, but your body doesn't feel well maybe in that moment. As you press the jurisdiction key, it gives off a powder that dissipates things that are related to hell that still may remain in the environment, or entities that want to crucify or torment or say negative things or not be there in a positive stance about you as a star seed and your life. The light wave kids are using this heavily because they know that even in their associations at school, there are beings that show up, and sometimes for the teenagers or even the adults, it can be related to drug use. So they're using this key for drug use. You never put it in a person. It's just something to shower around them, and the drug entities or the drug lords then go away. That's a sick thing to think about, but there is a wide variety of people using things like meth or other drugs that aren't good for the mind or good for the planes associated. And then things roll in that are very dark or damaging around them. And then it goes out into the environment and damages others too. The drug use is immense because people are ill perhaps in light, and they go on the drug and feel a little better, but that doesn't help in the long haul because the drugs associate with planes of hell. Alcohol can be that way too. So if you go into a bar or frequent a place where you have wine, even wine bars, this is a good substance to throw around the wine bar and press the key to clear out what is associated with alcohol that can also be very dark or unnerving. Places do gather where there can be ill resources, and that's sad. It can be at work, it can be at home, it can be even in places like churches or shopping malls, and things also attached to products or food at the store. This substance is good to powder around the grocery store because it will cause what's ill in the packages to go away. And this didn't used to be a problem maybe 5 years ago, but it's grown to be one. So use these gifts wisely, consciously, because sometimes they're more powerful consciously, and know the kids and teenagers are loaded with them and try to clean up things as they go. Sometimes there are places that they don't frequent that you can clean up. We'll cease, and we always prefer a mellow and peaceful environment. And that helps you perhaps in your own existential truth more regularly as you live this life of yours. And so we bless you as Taos that are trying to bring forward new information or new understanding or new gifts to allow your divine missions to surface. There's a purpose in existential knowing, which is to know who you are and where you're going and why the world sways or swings the way that it does. And in knowing your world, then you can adjust your systems of dreaming to stream in a way that serves your own existential purpose. An existential purpose is a mission of you as a seed that was there when you were born to fulfill upon. And purpose is very existential for all seeds. Most are born to understand or witness their world and certain experiences that you foster through time. Some were gifted with a purpose of some travel to experience other cultures or another relocation to another continent where you have an opportunity to live in another world that you were not born in to understand yourself better. Some are born with purposes to stay put for a time and aid others in the jurisdiction of family or family life in the country that you were born. Purposes vary in each jurisdiction of what you were here to do and what you're here to foster in your own mindset, what you're here to understand or interpret about your world, and what it is that you desire most to fulfill yourself in your heart space. Every existential purpose also has a mission of growing in care, growing in love, and growing in a direction that's fruitful to your own system of life. And growing also in a way that then impassions the spirit and the soul to foster a journey that grows in a way that's not only abundant but feels fulfilling unto your heart and mind. But purpose is very personal, and in the key that you're bringing, there's a personal truth about something you're trying to understand that may be very important to the journey of direction of your life. So here's where societal programming can really be interfering. And that's one of the things that we're going to work on today quite heavily, which has to do with not just karma, but societal programming. The societal programming can get into the works of your life purpose and derange it, sometimes for a time and sometimes forever. Seeds now are being assessed for, well, what was your existential purpose? Why couldn't you flow in that direction easily? Because of societal programming in your country or in your experience of life. Programming for future begins in grade school, and so let's take a moment to clear our societal programming from grade school about our future. The last second webinar, we went into a deprogramming system that you began to learn more consciously or lucidly. We're going to use that a little bit today to clear out childhood programming that said, this is your destiny of purpose. And if it didn't all clear in your ascension days, it will clear now. There are two things that often get in the way of existential purpose in the analysis of the Tao of the Seas. One is that there's something about it that just can't align with your close circuit of people. Okay? So the close circuit of people that you have known reinforces the issue of social ordering to say that existential purpose can't be lived or unfold as you desire it to. So if that's still at the effect of you, there may be layers of other programming that's laid on top of your educational program that interferes with your existential purpose. Let's clear that out too and allow something else to enter that star seed mission that says, no, your purpose is to be fulfilled upon and not lost to the winds of time. Now for Asur'Ana, when she went through a major life reversal at age 33, 34, and 35, that's when she let go of all of her programming that got in the way with her existential purpose. She had 5 or 6 years of training as a psychic, and she went forward as a psychic at first and started small classes during the weekends, school holiday breaks, and summer vacation when she had free time from her then career as a school teacher, and then bridged into writing and then starting her website and all the things you kind of know about her. So a major life reversal can release existential interference of purpose. And Asur'Ana also had a lot of deprogramming knowledge due to her days with her teacher, Victoria. And that was very useful because some of the programs that were the biggest interference were large numbers of bees long, like 1,000,000 bees long. She would go into it and say, "This is nuts. This programming is so huge. I don't know how anybody could ever get out from under it because it's 1,000,000 bees long in my molecules and it's like all over the body." And she deprogrammed it diligently because she said, "No, I'm just going to let go of this." And it released. She had a very different life working as a school teacher. And suddenly, her real mission could come forward as a teacher of spiritual truth. And then her life rearranged to go in that direction. So she resigned from full-time school teaching and worked as a substitute teacher to give her time to write about spiritual ascension, and then created her website before reuniting with Per to fulfill upon their shared mission together. Now we're aware that probably all of you have that type of level of program in you of 1,000,000 bees of cause and effect. And there were actually 3 for Asur'Ana. One was 100,000 bees of cause and effect. Another was like 500,000 bees of cause and effect. And the last one was 1,000,000. So last night she said, "Well, that was my biggest interference to my purpose, to let go of school teaching and grow in a new direction where I could be a spiritual teacher. So she looked at you to see if you had that kind of societal level programming, and yes, you did. It may not be 1,000,000 bees, but it could be as many as 200,000, maybe more. And it derails you of ever fulfilling upon your original sea mission in this life. So we say to the program of SOSA, well, let's engineer it that you take that out tonight or today. Some of you already released it, and it connects to many other programs that keep you strapped in your belief systems that you can't really fulfill upon what you like to do in this lifeline of yours. Perhaps as many as 150. And I say to all of you, well, let them all go and then see what else comes in that is more related to your existential purpose. And so you all are in the midst of doing this, that are choosing to attend to this webinar and receiving this healing. That's very sad in a way, because many seeds never get to their real purpose because of this huge level of programming that says your life is meant to do this and nothing more. For some of you that are older, it doesn't matter. Renew and revive in light, and then go fulfill upon something beautiful that feels true to the purpose of you. And many parts of the mission of your life already probably have been fulfilled upon. Also, many of you have made changes that seem very adventurous to go off in this direction, or do this, or let go of this and live on another continent for a time, or travel to places you had never been before, or see the things in yourself you really need to. So we can't say that your entire mission is derailed, but the entire mission could not maybe flourish entirely because of that level of social ordering in the program. And it's interesting to see how that may affect your own persona, because there may be a sentiment that you really don't believe in yourself, or you really don't think you can foster that, or you really don't think you can rise into that occasion and live it within you. And so the release of that programming is going to release patterning, other programs that say you can't do what your heart really wishes to do in this life of yours, that you can fulfill upon this, and you can go in the direction that you really do desire and can have it be fulfilled upon and succeed. Therefore, the light wave mind kids wanted this order of release too, because Asur'Ana went to them last night and said, Well, look at what we're finding. I mean, I remember going through this change, and it really shifted my perspective of myself, because I gained enough confidence to lead groups at psychic workshops, and then self-published my books and created a website to express what I thought was useful about Earth's ascension and the spiritual path. And if I can do that, so can many of you too, who seeks light to rise to the occasion of what you would really like to do in a purposeful mission of yourself. Some of these kids are seeds, but not that many. But kids still want something else, and they're subject to the same kind of program, and so they wanted to release it right away, and went about it in their own way. And I said, good for you. Do something else other than being blocked in a purpose that may be really beautiful in your anthology. Research your anthology and bring a beautiful purpose forward, and then allow the programming to come in to allow that to be true for you. I would say the same thing for each of you, to let go of the programming that says that your existential purpose can't be fulfilled upon, and bring in something that says it can, and then rise into the occasion when the opportunity shows up, and motion forward in a new direction that's beautiful for you. Now, here we're going to get into the issues of karma too, because karma is a system of debt that the society imposes on everyone, including starseeds. So you have a bill laid on you at birth. Then you go, thank you very much, and how can I clear this bill? Now the bill wasn't generated by the seed. It was generated by a societal program. And societal programming reinforces its network of karmic links. That's a weird thing about it. And a long time ago, Asur'Ana talked about good karma and bad karma, and to forgive the bad and try to release it, or balance your debt, and let the good karma take you to where you want to be. And the truth is, dreams align that way. That's kind of sick, but they do. And in light, dreams don't have karma. They're light infused, and you motion them, and you should be free to go experience them. But others may or may not align unless they sense that they have a debt to absolve with you. In the early days of our Dreamtime Ascension School, or DAS gatherings, everybody had a debt to be there, and then they showed up and you settled your debt in participation of one level or another. Asur'Ana never put more debt on any of you, although she thought about it and said, well, if I give them debt, then they'll show. But then she realized that would create debt for her, and she didn't want that, so she never did that. Lo and behold, events were never much bigger than 70 because those are the ones that had debt. She would have liked it to be 100 or 1,000 or whatever it was, but it never grew that big because you have to put that on a lot of people to show up to be there. That's what the big gurus do. They put that on everybody, and they can have events of 1,000, or they can have a best-selling book because they put a lot of that on everybody to read their book. And that's how it just goes. But then you end up with a huge bill when you exit the physical world that says you have to be in poverty for the next 1,000 lifetimes to make up for all of that. So there's a certain number of lifetimes you have to settle the debt that you put on everybody, and that's absolutely bizarre to think about from an existential point of view. An existential point of view is I am that I am and karma is not. What's karma? It doesn't exist in existential realities because existential realities are about dreaming what's true, and karma's not true. It's like a false position of non-truth or non-law that comes out of a monetary society in 7/7 way. Money is karma too because you go spend it on products that you owe a debt to. Shatar talked about that a lot in the Ascension Insights series. Why do you buy the toothpaste you do? Because you have karma too. Why do you eat where you eat? Because you have karma too. Why do you do anything? Because you have karma too. And that's the ways the society works. You ponder why you don't go to this other fine restaurant when it really has better food, and you eat at some other restaurant that isn't very good because you have a debt too. That's kind of a weird reality check for all of you. What are you doing? Where are you going? What are you buying? What are you wearing that you think you have some kind of debt to own because you owe something to that manufacturer or that whatever? Or do you shop at this store when this one would be much better for you in light wave motion because you have some kind of debt too? And it's time to probably let all of that go so you're free to go where it is right and not to where you think you need to be because of some debt-related issue of this society. So we can shed all of that now. There may be 9 or 10 programs you have in your molecular structure that says you have to do it right in karmic law of the society of this planet. And that's nonsense. That's absolutely nonsense. Let it go, get rid of it, and do what's right for you. And don't worry about karma at all because you can buy whatever you buy. Now here's the other side of the coin. As most of you work for companies or organizations or are in professions because you have karma to do so. But the karma does align the dream for where you work, and Shatar would call that good karma because it gives you income. If you absolve that, you might lose the job, and perhaps that's not the best thing for you to do, alright? So leave the karma in place for the work that you need for your economy until something else comes along to lift you in another direction of life unfolding. One initiate, David, used to work his comic bank book in real estate by hooking the buyers and sellers together that had karma to sell and buy. And all of his listings that he took on eventually sold for the most part because David could find the buyer that had the karma to buy the house, maybe even if they didn't like it, who knows. But it was an interesting journey of, just hook her up and bingo, David has a contract, and then he has a chunk of money coming in when it closes. And that worked very well for many years. If you're in sales or you're trying to do something to cause and effect something, you can look for the same kind of system for yourself, that you hook the buyers and sellers together in karma and let them do their thing, and then it all works out. From an existential point of view, you do what's right for you, because if it's not right for you, then you shouldn't do it. If it is right for you and it's in the society at large, and you understand how it works, then you do what you do to cause an effect that you need. So you don't give that up because the society still functions under karmic law. But you play it in a direction that works for you. So if you need a job or you want a job in a different direction, you line up the cause and effect. You line up the karma between yourself and the business you want to hire you. And then you go ahead and do that, alright? Then it works for you, and suddenly you have a nice interview and you're hired. That's how karma works in the karmic bank book of the world. You can say to yourself, do I create that karma if I don't have it? Sure you do. I mean, it's just a bill, and you think to yourself, well, okay, I can do that. Yes, you can create karma if you want to have the book that you need to support yourself. Now you might say to yourself, isn't that going to create karma to do so? Here's where we'll get into existential cause and effect. If you need something, then it creates nothing other than an existential calling for that. That's what you need. Now that's different for the guru that creates way more than he needs. Right now he's a millionaire and he owns all these properties in a yacht. And everybody bows to his toes and kisses him. You're a real guru because you're wealthy, and now we can worship you, and all these other things that gurus get to live, which isn't true, of course. They get opposite lives after that, and reincarnating many lifetimes here without money and all these other things that happen in the karmic bank books of the oligarchy society. We would say to you, in an existential cause and effect circumstance, don't reincarnate. Let go of that need now, because there's programming in the body, perhaps from this society, that says you have to reincarnate when you pass. So let that go and erase it well, because you don't want anything showing up that forces you to inhabit another body, maybe not even if of your own genealogy as you passed. In an existential cause and effect, and star seed systems, you were always allowed what you need. Now most of you aren't wealthy. Most of you have whatever it is that you need in terms of clothes and food and economy and all of that. And sometimes you wish it was more. I know you would like to do that, but in star seed principle, you're allowed to hunt for what you need. Now, hunting is an odd thing when you think about hunting animals to eat, but in an existential truth, if you were an indigenous tribe and you needed that skin for clothing or you needed that flesh to eat, most of them don't eat meat. Sometimes they eat fowl or fish. But if they need it for that, they are allowed to take it because in existential truth, you're allowed to provide for yourself, and there's no debt to nature for doing that. But they consider anything that you take to fulfill upon what you need to be okay in your world of hunting. So when you have a job and you create karma, you hunt the job. You're hunting for money that then buys the food and provide for what you need. People that overhunt and take too much have a problem existentially because they're in principle out of balance. Now sometimes seedlings understand this. We'll give an example of this with an associate of ours whom we shall call Felicity. Felicity's father was a beautiful seedling that loved her a lot. He didn't believe in all this ownership for rental, in all this home ownership for rental, as he thought it cost people not to be able to afford a home because housing values went way up. They had an accountant that got himself into like 40 or 80 rental properties and then retired at age 40 because he was probably a multi-millionaire by that time, given the value rise in the San Francisco Bay Area after 20 years of inflated real estate. Felicity's dad just knew that was wrong. Everybody has a right to their own home and to own their home, and he wouldn't go along with Felicity's mother, who wanted to buy real estate to rent out or buy real estate to fix up and sell again. They had endless arguments over this topic because she's of the oligarchy society and he's a seedling saying, I don't want to do that with our funds because it's wrong. And so you can think of it that way for seed systems in an existential truth. And Felicity's father was very existential even though he was a seedling. You're allowed to hunt for what you need and have what you need. If you have too much, it costs something else in star seeds and perhaps seedlings too, but perhaps not in the society at large, who says, well, you reincarnate to balance your scale of overhunting. You would say that the gurus, the multimillionaires, or the big corporate lead-ins that make all this mega money way overhunted for way beyond anything that they can do with all those funds or all those houses they own or whatever else they own, and they would be considered an existential knot. An existential knot says, you're dead, you've overhunted, you're dead, okay? In a sea system, if you overhunt and gain a lot of wealth, you end up diseased because you had too much, because that's an existential knot. So most of you have kept yourself in balance one way or another. You have enough and not a lot, and you have what you have, and it maybe comes and goes, so you don't become an existential knot and get sick. That's a weird thing to think about, but it's like your innate, biological programming to stay in balance. This society's way out of balance. I mean, they've over-harvested the trees and over-harvested everything. They're into everything in the natural world, and they're over-harvested things for products that line the shelves with different names. They've overlined even the natural world substances of minerals and vitamins with way too many brands and way too much extracted out of nature, to a point that nature is dying from being beaten up through their harvesting thinking. A lot of the stuff that maybe never sells, and is a very sick way to be. I mean, society is way out of balance, and they have grown into an existential knot en masse as a result of their overhunting, and that means a big fall of the society. And they know it on some level. The programs in light say, well, there's going to be a meltdown of wealth that overhunted, and that could really affect everyone else. Seeds may not be affected because you stay in balance with what you own, or you spend, or whatever it is you do, and it will be a gradual meltdown. The light wave kids, numbering 100,000, that interlinks, say, well, we have to do something about that too, or we're going to be out on the streets one day, and we don't want that to happen. And so now it will be undone or fixed. I don't really know yet as a yogi that talks to you, but they'll figure something else perhaps in social dreaming about graduating it into something else. Now, if people of big wealth turned around and set up a lot of scholarships and start donating their money back to the poor or whatever it is, they could settle their heavy debt. If they did it in their death and just left everything to many, many people, then it could turn the world or the society of a monetary system of existential knot into something else. And that is what the kids are postulating. But you still have the problem of raping the world of too many of its own resources. The only thing that might change that is if they replant the forests, harvest, and they start to replant the things that have been stripped, and try to clean up the garbage with a unique way other than letting it stink. All those things are kind of there even as seed systems. This need to recycle, this need to do things differently, this need not to just keep creating more crap out of things that planet can't really expand any more of, and then have to go and then have it go in a different direction. There is a lot of that going on in it, and it does start to turn things around from an existential knot with nature to existential clause of cohabiting the same region of domain, which is the planet. Also, the population way exceeds what the planet wants, and that creates another existential knot and a calling in that for a recession of the numbers of humans incarnate. And that does come forward as disease, as it may placate a lot of people to get sick suddenly, and light can exacerbate that due to diet and other things we talked about through time to actually trigger that to come true. But there's a lot of existential knots already in action in this civilization because everything is existential. Even their society without cease, and everything they do is still subject to existential law. So there's going to be changes that the kids can't undo over the next 100 years that may be very grim somehow if a lot of people start to die off, and you're losing not just your grandparents or parents, but maybe younger people who aren't well in light and simply fold due to strokes or shocks or something else it hits them. That could be seen as an existential knot of populations that the society has grown into, and nature, if they replant it and start ceasing to harvest so much and recycle more, will begin to re-sprout, and then the existential knot at you and society and at you too, because you're still part of society, begins to fade. The way that existential knot could arise is not only in earth movements, where there's natural disasters or earthquakes and lava flow and stuff like that, but also in the meltdown of the poles, which Edgar Cayce predicted is a whole new tundra, where much of the continental mass might be then underwater. That still could happen as major light gates continue to open into the aurora and melt down the lava too. And when the lava melts down, the planet kind of starts to expand. So it expands, and then the water melts down, and then there's a lot of continental shift, and the existential knot for what humans have done to nature can create natural disaster after natural disaster, where people die or suffer whatever it is, because they put the planet in an existential knot about them by over-harvesting and over-populating and all that. And that's how the causes of law work over society or over any group of people or any planet in it, and it can't be shook off. But you as a seed don't want to live in a region that might have a natural disaster, and so you plant yourself where your purpose can be fulfilled upon for the duration of your life. I don't know about natural disasters ahead exactly, because the planet has so many misalignments. It's really hard to say at this point what may or may not unfold, but light is continuing to stream, and the gates are increasing, and so the meltdown of the poles and global warming may show up to be extreme in the coming even 10 years. People that used to live in the regions that had snow may not have snow. That happened in Idaho for Per and Asur'Ana temporary stay there before their relocation to Mesa. The previous year, there was usually 2 or 3 feet of snow. The year of their residency, there was none. It was absolutely a wash, a sprinkling of an inch, and then it would wash away. So we'll explain things to each of you. The warming is probably underway, and I don't think there's going to be a gate closure again. The gates are going to continue to open and purge a lot of light into the system, and that's going to create changes in the aurora where there's going to be more of a meltdown of lava. In the beginning, it may be a contraction that triggers earthquakes that have never been in places before to show up. There have been reports of that even in Japan and other things that aren't expected, and then it continues as it contracts or expands, and we're not indigenous to where we just walk to other land if the trees fold or something like that, but it's a sick thing with high rises. I would advise you for your own cause and effect not live in such a populated region anyway as a star seed, and to stay out of them if you can at all, because high rises have a type of light that's very, very forceful at this time. It can be very seer oriented towards your mind in particular. If you're staying in a hotel, don't stay in a high-rise. Stay in a low-rise hotel that's perhaps 2 or 3 stories and be better in it, because light up the galleyways of cement can get very seer-oriented. Although the penthouse might be luxurious to stay in, don't unless it's only three floors up. They knew that in Atlantis. They never built anything more than usually 2 layers of housing over a 2-story underground system that held their lounges, their food, their music, and stuff like that. And a lot of little shops they may be, and a little shops may be there. The base was always an underground pool because they knew sun wasn't always good and people liked to swim at night, and that it was protected and safe. So their stories were never more than 4 with the pool underground. That's lightweight thinking for understanding how light motions, because it would flower in that size building. It doesn't flower in high rises at all, even out in nature. So be aware of that. If you're in a high rise, stay on the lower floors. If you have to stay there, stay on the 2nd or 3rd floor max and be okay with that. In existential knots, things start to fall, dreams start to fold. And so what's happening for society at large is the dreams are starting to fold down the dimensions and can't recreate what you know now, alright? There's no way to stop that, because the society went into a huge existential knot maybe 12 years ago over big monetary greed in a few hands, and also in relation to the economy of society, and also in relation to the removal of so many resources of the planet and the size of the population. I mean, it's a quadruple, not for all 4 of those issues, and it forces a renunciation of the dream to fold, and Sosa is aware of that. The folding dream can lead to economic meltdowns that can lead to not necessarily earthquakes per se, but that may come about due to the melting core and the melting poles, but it can create corporate downsides where they cease to exist. It can create economic disturbances where banks close, but also societal meltdowns where presidents or prime ministers change suddenly. So some places will experience the meltdown in banks, some places will experience government upheavals, some will experience it in corporate upheavals where corporations melt and there's millions of layoffs. It's hard to say how the meltdown of dreams will go. In existential societal purpose, it's all about the individual flourishing for himself, what fulfills themselves, and not some galley way of one purpose of opening some huge factory and creating all these things in making yourself a millionaire or a billionaire. That's never an existential purpose in any human system, and it grew to be one in 7 society. But it's not real or it's not truthful unto what should be, not just for starseeds, but any human jurisdiction anywhere. So this is a very fallible place, and because existential purpose is all about each individual creating from their heart what they love to do most and not over hunting for it, that you create something you share together and people appreciate within a local community. You create enough to supply the community of whatever it is you have to give, and the community shares back whatever each has to give. There's no money. It's just an existential clause of we give and we receive in balance. And that's true existential dreaming in a society, say, of either indigenous bead traders or even in Atlantis, where they had script, but you never acquired much more. There was always something free in some level of what was produced by people, and they were usually handmade. Everything was, at least the first half of their societal jurisdiction, but later it went into factory operation too, which destroyed them in the end, because they too went into an existential knot. We'll explain that a little bit. When a society goes into an existential knot, it melts down. In their case, it was a comet that hit the planet. The gate ceased, and the planet suddenly started to freeze. But that was the result of their existential knot, perhaps? So they froze as a society, and they euthanized en masse, and finally they ended the social classes and everything in their exodus. But when you go into an existential knot, it affects the whole planet, and something may occur that extinguishes their existence. And so Earth went into a heavy ice age after that, and that may or may not have occurred if they hadn't gotten out of their existential truth of being in balance, and why a comet would be called to injure a part of the planet, causing a gate freeze as a result of that. It has to do with calibrated understanding of how cause and effect work, this planet could cause something weird too, like nuclear armament, that might end its existential knot. That would be weird if that unfolded. And of course, those things are natural disasters you don't necessarily know about until they hit. So that's how an existential knot in a society could cause a natural disaster that affects a part of the planet or the whole planet. That's kind of hard to understand, except that human awareness creates a consciousness, and that consciousness wraps around the planet. And if they go into an existential knot, then they cause a planetary knot to surface to allow them to quit. That's a very weird thing. That's a very weird thing, but that's how it worked even in Atlantis on this planet. And it does on all planets that humans reside. If you're in balance, life carries on, and it creates a planetary circumstance where the planet itself supports the life of the humans, and they support the life of the planet by loving it and caring for it in creational theory. If your life goes into an existential knot, it's a very uncomfortable thing to have happen, and we'll talk a little bit about that. That can occur from overhunting or creating too much economy, and it can occur even in an inheritance that's very large. It could throw you into an existential knot. You say, if I get this inheritance, what can I do with it? Well, if you don't own your home, you could probably buy your own home, and maybe you do it outright and say, well, I deserve a place to live. And that could be one way of not putting yourself into an existential knot from a big inheritance. But the other option is to do something with it that's purposeful. Buy a business and let people do well in it, in earning their economy, or do something that your heart has always wanted to do in itself, and then giving to yourself something that you've always wanted and fulfills your heart, then in the truth of it, the existential knot for the inheritance won't show. So you've always wanted to travel the world, and you line up this very extravagant trip. It spends a lot of money, $20,000 or $30,000, and you go give that to yourself. Then it's not an existential knot because it's something you always wanted to do. It may be a part of your original purpose when you were born, is to see the world and other cultures and experience it in a beautiful way that you can't foster financially until your mother or father dies and you inherit a chunk of money. But understand the need to use that money to give yourself something that aligns with your purpose, and then you don't go into an existential knot in an inheritance of money that's more than you need to hunt for in order to live. Now, if you think of it as retirement money, then perhaps that's okay too. And that gives you an ability to let go of your need to work maybe early so you can focus on other things. There are many ways to go about it, but in being aware about inheritance and existential knot, you won't make a mistake and cancel your life and get sick in the end for an inheritance that's more than you really need. Because you're allowed an existential purpose only, that which you need to be well or survive or do whatever you do. Sometimes that's kind of frustrating too, because you think, well, I like to just have a lot more to do whatever I do. But many of you save, you travel, you get to events, you don't spend a lot, and it all works for you too. So life doesn't have to be an omission of all the things your heart desires to go experience at all. It can be very beautiful even on a marginal economy if you just budget for it and figure it out in a way that works for you. And so we won't say anything more about that, because that's how many seas operate. You can be very, very frugal at times, and then in your own need, perhaps spend some because you need something out of what you spend to get where you're going or what you're doing, and then it all works for you. And then there's always the settlement of sharing. If you have things you don't need, give them away to a friend, or take them to Goodwill and let somebody impoverished have them, or however that works. And that sometimes keeps you from going into an existential knot from having too many clothes in your closet or wherever else you tend to acquire through time. We won't say anything more than that, except that in existential cause, you hunt only for what you need and not more. Then you're in balance, and your purpose will unfold easier when you're in balance. If you're out of balance, purpose can't even arise in your life. That's hard to explain, but it just can't, because if you're way out of balance, existential purpose is cancelled. And then you don't have what you really wanted or what you really needed or whatever it is. Then you get sick, and in any case, in any way you go about it. Most Cs want to avoid disease, like to the max, because disease is painful. It hurts the infrastructure of the body, and that's what drives you to be in balance and not to hunt too much or have too much. And so we'll just say be well with whatever you do have. If you want to envision something a little bit more, then do so, because generally existential purpose includes a residence to live and its furnishings and enough comfort in however you devise your existence. That's a base for everyone. Therefore, if you don't have a home and you want one, then envision that, so that it comes about through your existential cause at birth, that you had a right to be in a place that is yours, and maybe you don't have to pay any rent for, and that's a flourishment of something that the C system brings in. There is programming around house ownership. Some of you may already have it. Some of you may have erased it or gotten rid of it and then sold your home. Some of you have never had a home. You've always leased somebody else's house. Whatever it is, you can bring societal programming for home ownership and allow that to line up in some way that perhaps you're not expecting in your lifeline. And a home doesn't have to be karmic. One's home is considered a need you have. You need a place to reside. If you have a vacation home, then don't. It's better to sell it off because the second home is a need not. Now, Per and Asur'Ana have 2 homes, one in Alta, Norway, and one in Gold Canyon, Mesa. This is necessary for their global world service contract, and so it's not an existential knot and is allowed. For most, instead of owning a second home, maybe timeshares come in convenient because you can pay a little bit of money and trade them to go here or there on your holiday. If you know when you're going to go on holiday each year, but it's easy to lease a rental place for a holiday anyway, so you don't really need to own it, and we're explaining it from a purposeful mission of hunting too much. Now, if you share your cabin or whatever it is with many family members, then that's okay. If you don't, and it's solely for you, then you enter an existential knot about having too much, and you may lose your health, and that's all we would have to say about that. That won't occur through a timeshare, and it won't occur through leasing vacation rentals wherever you want to go. It also won't occur for a trailer, so you can own a trailer and enter around by dragging it around to parks all you want, and it won't create an existential not for you. And so we explain these things just from a jurisdiction of health. You want your health as a seed, and you want your health through time. And if you don't repose that health through being in existential balance, then it's a problem for the body. We explain that because it's a biological truth. This society is way out of balance about many things, and many do get sick as a result of their own existential knots. Sometimes they're impoverished and they even get sick, which usually isn't an equation for any star seed galaxy. I mean, if you have less than you need, the body retains its health always. So this society is so screwed up that even impoverished people can end up sick, and that's very sad to say. How in a non-truth and non-existential truth, the seventh reality is. That's painful to witness if you go to places where very impoverished people can't feed themselves or don't have enough and have extended bellies and all of that. That's very, very sad. And the society is getting a little bit better at sharing, but probably not enough, and the millionaires and billionaires don't always care enough about the misery of others, as they've never experienced that in their own life. Sometimes, if you've never experienced it, it's hard to imagine why you wouldn't want to allow that to continue anywhere on the world. It does create a collective pain, and it creates a collective pain that can be felt through the mineral kingdom. Even now, as light emotions begin to pour through the mountain ranges and the sea, that there's a collective pain for the misery humanity has engrossed itself in. So you have the misery of World War II and all these other scattered wars that occurred before and since. There's a pain that occurs for each body that's smashed or killed or whatever it is that happened. There's a pain for what occurred in Hiroshima and Nagasaki when those bombs were ignited. There's a pain for every person that dies in any war, and the sea absorbs that pain, and the mountains absorb that pain. And as you inaugurate light, the business of existential causes that say never to war and never to kill one another, which were ignored in this societal dream, and they are in place to prevent planetary attrition. So because of their wars and because of all the pain that has occurred in their warfare, there is pain on the planet that is causing her to die. So the planet is dying for the nature of this society being outside of their existential clauses of peace and non-harm. And so you, as a seed, can witness that this isn't your culture, that you don't understand enough as to why it's not wise to do all the things that they've done. So the planet's dying and going extinct earlier. It is folding and sinking some. There's a lot of Taos present to try to prevent it from just rip-tiding down so far that the planet could leave its orbit and freeze suddenly and sent to the mother sun floor. Because that could occur in this kind of system of whatever this society has caused towards the planet, okay? So it won't happen in your lifespan, but it could happen in 80 years. The Taos are trying to upset that because it harms the mother sun floor. So there are things that this society has done that has killed a planet, and that's very sad. You don't see it yet when you look out your window if you're living near some place beautiful, but you can see it in the trees that are withering with the pine beetles or other conditions that are killing things in the European pine forests. You can see it in the land too, because it has lost its mineral content. And of course, we're, as humans, that the food that you're breeding on the same farmlands is less and less of value of nutrients that your body needs to sustain its mindset in health. And then, of course, there's all the extractions of the vitamin and mineral company that you're aware of, that you take to keep yourself going in light wave mindset. It's an odd juxtaposition of the fact that the minerals aren't put back in the land as is formed to cause the minerals to be in the plants. That's a big problem, but it's not just that. It's that the land is losing its content. When a planet begins to die, it loses its equivalency of that which sustains life. Now, you're not going to see this in your generation. This society may not either, if they expire due to gases coming up from big gates that are aerating into the sky that you breathe. And it causes your lungs to collapse or blister. That could easily happen in the next 50 years, ending this society altogether. It has happened at other times on Earth, so that's not unusual. The Egyptians extinguished themselves due to gases that caused their lungs to feel punctured, and they couldn't breathe anymore, and they fasted and let go of their lives at that point in their society. So the gases will probably consume the society before a lot of the other things that might also end their worlds, due to existential knots on top of them, for how they have behaved through time in relation to this planet, in relation to one another. So the planet's dying, and that can't be reversed. The insects have chosen to withdraw. The bees chose to withdraw recently, and you're aware of bee problems due to Wi-Fi and other things that are happening in this world. Asur'Ana and Pear used to have this big blooming tree in front of their house in Mesa, Arizona. 2 years the bees came in so strong you could sit under the tree and listen to their buzz, and it was very beautiful. Last year there were no bees, so they all died of, perhaps, or the Wi-Fi drove them away. But the bees didn't officially choose to extinguish their existence along with the ants and other small insects until this last year. So the planet's going into a recession. And that's due to the existential knots on top of humanity. They've just been way too out of balance for what this planet can hold in light wave motion. Many of you feel that pain as you sit with the minerals or sit with the mountains, and there's programming in you to feel planetary pain. So you may be feeling planetary pain or societal pain if you're depressed. It's time to release your programming to do so, because it's really sick feelings that can arise in you from what's going on due to the changes from being here to bloom in life, which was going to be the truth of the planet even 8 years ago to now, where the planet is choosing to recede and die, and part of that comes about due to the death of the Planetary Dao, and then the Planetary Tao folded about 6 years ago. So the insects and everything knows it, and they're making a choice to allow it to wither. There's a vast amount of pain flowing through the mountain ranges and the land, even in the national parks, that didn't used to be there. And so allow the programming to fade from your molecular structure to say that you have to attend to the pain that the planet's in, or the pain that society is in at large, and then you be better in your transfusion, especially those of you that may go emotional from time to time and feel like you have to cry. That could be the undercurrent of cause, or it could be the undercurrent of cause of your depression if you were very much aligned with the planet in your ascension. And Asur'Ana was obviously too, and she cried a lot about it until she let go of the need to feel nature in its choice to go extinct along with the planet. But there was still an emptiness in it too when she let go of that, because it had filled her so much to be there with the forests and the trees in the places that she and Per traveled. And it was hard to feel that love space in the change of the planet and its choice to go extinct. There's nothing any of us can do about that, because it's a society that's not really a star seed society, and it did whatever it did, and it caused the planet to go extinct early. You're here as a seed, maybe to witness that, but be aware of the truth that if you let go of some time of what you think is programming to feel planetary love or natural world love, that there may be an emptiness in that. But we do recommend it nonetheless, because as you continue to transfuse, you may go into deep pain from the emotions, in particular octaves related to the mountains, lakes, trees, and sea, and they may not be far above you. So let go of the need to feel that kind of suffering ahead, because this isn't your society as a seed. It's theirs, and they have a hard time ahead. These life wave mind kids potentially for the things that their society has caused. Leave it for them to try to figure out, because it's not your problem really. You didn't cause it, as you're not a part of their society. So we also like you to let go of whatever cause you may be harboring about that has gone out in the world of societal issues, or of how the society has killed the planet. Let that go back to them, because it's not your cause, as you weren't born of this society at all, and that may alleviate a large debt of you, a large karmic debt that you don't even know that you're carrying for death of a planet. Asur'Ana realized she was carrying that karma perhaps 4 years ago and let it go, and it really shifted something for her. Yogis of this society that may be in Tibet maybe can't release that because they are of this society and it is part of their collective karma or weight to bear, so to speak, for whatever they've caused and affected in this reality known as Earth. So let that go now, because you didn't cause the planet to die, because you're not part of this society. That helps perhaps change the direction of your life some, because that cause and effect can impose changes into futures yet born. And karma in and of itself is an illusion of death, and there is programming to agree to that illusion in your biology or in your molecular structure. We'll highlight that now and let you let that go. When you let go of the delusion of karma, you can work with it in a way that we spoke to earlier in this session, where you can create karma as you need it to create your economy or create the job that you are believing you need, and not be in the delusion that you have to stay there if it isn't right, or that you can't create something better if you choose to with another organization or someplace you like to generate your work. Whatever it is, let go of the delusion of karma that is permanent, or you have to follow it until the debt's paid off, or you have to stay there no matter what, as all of that is not really true. You should be free to move or move on when you need to, if the people you're working for aren't right, or the circumstance you're in with a company isn't right, because you need to be in a place that feels like peace and harmony to you as a seed to be better in your light emotion, so you don't grow ill in your transfusion ahead. So if you don't have a job that you love, or people you're around that you care for in that work, it's time to change that, because that can make the body very ill very quickly in light wave emotion. It's not your existential purpose to sit in a dream that doesn't align with your body and its choice to be healthy. So it's time to create karma, maybe for another job or another place to work that is in alignment with what you need. Allow yourself to make that change, and that will align you back into your purpose of being with people that harmonize with you, and not those that don't. That's a part of the purpose of all existential realities always is you should be in harmony and be free to express yourself in the truth of who you are freely, and the freedom to be understood, and the freedom to understand others in whatever mindset that they may be in, and retain peace in it. So that is a part of your existential purpose. And if there is a lot of arguments at work, or arguments at home, is not your truth to be in that circumstance. If there is discomfort at home, it may be your truth to extract yourself out of that circumstance to realign with your existential purpose, because the purpose always has a cause in it to be fulfilled, to sway in care and be at peace with family or those you associate with in the world. And there are always times to rearrange your life to align with that, and then your purpose flows. Now, purpose in and of itself needs to let go of karma, because the purpose of you has nothing to do with karma. It has nothing to do with what karma will cause or effect in your life at all. Many confuse purpose with karma. Oh, I have karma to do this in my life because it was given to me when I was born, or I acquired it. There's also a karmic trading bank in the dreams of humanity, and they trade karma. People sometimes lose their karma to have a job that they really want, or a dream that they really want, or a career that they really want. And if that's been a problem for you, it's time, or a dream that they really want, or a career that they really want, and if that's been a problem for you, it's time to let go of the need to be in the karmic system of gain or loss and be in your purpose, which we'll call the karma you need to generate the dream for the work that provides for you, or the boyfriend or family or spouse that you're in need of, or the home you perhaps are in need of to own. A purpose will generate the dream within the societal classes of karma, and you don't need to be playing the karmic game. There are karma brokers, and there are karmic alliances, and there's karmic circumstances and karmic degrees of what you can and can't have, and all this stuff that's a part of their societal game of death. It's time to let go of the programming to participate in any of it and choose to be free to just be in your purpose as a seed, and the purpose will align the karma that you need to fulfill upon it, and that's all. So take a breath about all of that and let go of the weight of what that means to let that go out of your own body, because many people in this society and even seas grow old in age due to karmic weight in the infrastructure of the molecules, that all the deaths you've lived and all the deaths you have yet to live and all the deaths of the society imposed upon you sometimes frees up the molecular infrastructure to a point that you begin to age rather than retain your youthfulness. And so as you let go of all those program strands that say you have karma that you need to be a part of in your future, your past, or where it was, it may allow the molecules to liven up some, to renew and revive yourself if you're older in this time period. This is hard to even express, but everybody ages. Most of it is due to karma, and then the exchanges that occur into the molecular structure because of the debts owed or settled. So the problem with attachment is, for every debt that you've settled in the karmic bank book of the society, you have attachments to the people you settled it with, and those never release. And so let's release the programming of the undercurrent as to why the attachment remains that ages you or would age you, and let it go now. That's a very sick assumption in this society, that everybody ages and gets sick until they die. And that's their karmic cause too. They have a karmic cause that you were born and you have to die, and you're going to age until you sink through attachment due to death settled or not settled, and then you expire. It's a very sick system actually when you think about it from light emotion perspective, because the light goes in unevenly into the molecular structure if you have too much attachment. Many of you have burned off attachment in ascension days, end to end like a fuse, and let go of it. But in this circumstance, we want you to take the societal attachments and put it in your foundry, and release the programming that it may be attached to if you can, and see if that doesn't help you liven up more molecules as we infuse you today in the healing of this webinar. So we infuse you with each webinar, and it is usually a nice luster glow that you end up with at the end of our work together. That's part of our purposeful mission in giving you a boost to rise beyond and above what we're speaking to in each verbal article that we share with you. We really appreciate each of you being willing to transform to a molecular level to allow your life to unfold in a new direction. Everything is stored in the molecules as well as the cells. The cells have their own archives and records. That's a whole other story to try to release. It requires a lot of light infusion to release cellular records. We have to grow into a yogi to do that. It's hard to transfuse that high due to layers of the planet that are very detrimental to transfusing too high, but you can release your molecular records and the records in your bones eventually in what you call a system of diffusal of the archives that your bones have stored, and that's something that a Dao performs usually 3 times in every lifetime. If you haven't had a bone diffusal, then it's probably time to have, so to let the archives release and the bones be free of the pain or whatever you've experienced in the past suspended in your archive. So we'll help you with that maybe in the next 48 hours, because that's very liberating in light not to be saddled with your past in the bones that record everything in your body. We're going to tell you a few more things about karmic debt, and it's kind of weird, one of which is how the wealthy grow so wealthy. They are extortionists of karma, so they extort karma into huge bundles that then acquire a means to procure bundles of money, because a bundle is a karmic weight to bundles of money, as well as possessions, or houses they buy, or yachts they own, their bank book account, and all that, and they extort it out of the masses. If you have a product that the masses buy, then they extort it out of each one that buys something, which is a really weird objective of wealth. So you buy this box of cinnamon toast crunch or whatever you eat in the morning, and suddenly you're losing karma that you need to keep your life going in your death books, because it flows to the multi-millionaire or billionaire from that particular line of factory, farmland, or whatever it is. So we would say to you to be free of that system also, to lose good karma that you do generate, perhaps as a seed, to create the dream alliances that you need to do the things you like to do. So this is a hard thing to even describe. Let go of that programming and don't participate in it anymore, because it's just kind of grotesque in this time period of so many products and so many millionaires or billionaires lying on top of humanity to have those products sell. It has infiltrated the organic marketplaces such as Whole Foods and Trader Joe's. Some of these markets are flying with as many products and as big as a supermarket now, with organic fare boxes and boxes and boxes of stuff, and people who have grown on top of it to be millionaires or whatever they've done, and you buy that, you're just as subject to lose your karma as anything else. Asur'Ana and pair avoid products like that, and they get things from scratch. Some products don't take karma, and they may be generated by a seed. They like this one product from Bob's Red Mill, who's in Oregon in the US. He doesn't extract karma for using his flowers, and he has endless types of flowers that you can purchase to make interesting food that works well with light wave mindset. That's not true for most others, but if you get the food out of the bin, bulk shopping. So if you get the polenta or the quinoa or the pasta out of the bin instead of out of a box, you won't lose karma. And that's kind of weird, but people like to bin shop because it's less expensive. There's always a brand that doesn't extract karma from you. Muscle test and pick that brand for your pastas or anything you have to buy that's already pre-bagged, and you won't lose karma out of your life for whatever it is you wanted to create ahead. Vegetables don't take karma even though they put labels on them. Asur'Ana did look at that. Do the labels cause you to lose karma to the farmers that make money of this? It doesn't. So you're free to buy any vegetable you want that shimmers in light and feels okay. The other thing we can tell you about is that there is karma not only in anything pre-packaged, but even in restaurants. Asur'Ana and pair have been careful to find restaurants that don't take karma from them and only dine there. Some styles of cuisine don't take karma from anyone. Vietnamese and Thai are two cuisines that never take karma. That's not true for sushi or Italian, Chinese, French, American, Mexican, or Spanish, or all these other wonderful cuisines you can experiment with as you either cook or go out to dine. Indian food also doesn't take karma, and that's very Baba system that says we don't do that as a culture. So if a restaurant takes karma and you like to frequent it, take it back and spend it every time you go there, and then you balance it somehow. It's the best way we could describe it. That doesn't work with boxed products, but it works with restaurants, oddly enough. You don't want to be losing karma, or in the end you lose something else in your life that you thought was valuable for you to do or share or be or speak. Karma also is a creative endeavor, not? In your purpose, you can create anything. You can be an artisan that dances, sings, writes music, paints, or does sculptures, anything creative with the hands or the kitchen if you want to cook. And there's never karma associated at all, even in terms of what you might buy to create your project. There's no karma involved at all. If you turn around and sell it, you have to hook it into a karmic system where somebody comes along and buys it because they owe you a debt. Many Cs are not good at this. You do all this wonderful painting or whatever it is, and nobody buys it at the art fair. You make all these tinctures and you can't offload them, or whatever you try to do, it just doesn't sell. You're there going, why do I bother to do this if nobody will buy it? It's because you don't have a karmic clause system in your product so that it will find the buyer that needs to settle a debt to buy it. It's stupid, but that's how it works. So if you're going to make something to sell, make sure to build in the karmic clause in it so that the buyer finds it, and then it's okay. So do that in whatever product you have. Share it and sell it, and make your abundance that way if you choose to, and have fun with it. The other thing to keep in mind is that creativity is a natural C purpose. So if you haven't found something in your life to be creative about, whether it's song or dance or movement or painting or something else you would like to do, then please do so. Sports can also be a part of that purpose if you like hiking, or you like to ride your bike in the wind, or you enjoy swimming. All of that is a part of an existential purpose to let the body feel well, and it is a creative endeavor. It's never considered anything but physical creativity to dance or move in some way that's beautiful, however that may unfold. Don't be afraid to buy a really beautiful bicycle or buy a boat even, if you want to be out on the water, because being out on the water is also an existential purpose if you live near a lake or sea, because in it there is time to relax and revive and motion with the sea. And as you motion in a sea, often people release easier what they are working on existentially, to understand and forgive and allow an understanding to emerge in the realization of you. Riding a bike, rowing a boat, running or walking can work that way too. Also, riding on trains and cars is sometimes a natural release motion, as you just release it to the winds of time as you drive down the highway in your mind. Existential purpose includes an agreement to release, forgive, transform, transmute. Understand, for every program you run, you also need to forgive. Therefore, forgive the oligarchy society for its karmic bank book and however it works, and however it's affected your life with enough, or sometimes maybe not enough to do what you really like to do, what you really like to in your heart. Get over it and get on with it and go do what you really want and generate the karma that you need, because you're free of their system of a belief you have to be born with it, or you have to trade for it, or you have to extort for it, or all these other things that they go into. Oddly enough, it becomes human behavior because there are extortionists, there are robbers, there's credit card debt going on all over the place. It becomes behavior because it's part of their energetic systems of how it works in karma. Then you have people that participate in that choose not to ever engage with an extortionist, as you use your credit card online or use a system that's safe for you and never be robbed of anything. Let it be that you're not going to participate in the karmic system of robbery, and that could include your home or your car, anything else you might lose. Be well with that when you're outside of the karmic system, you don't have to be robbed or lose anything ever, because that's only a part of their reality of death and not yours as a starseed. We have a few more things to say about karma. It imposes itself into almost anything. An affiliate of ours, Chi, inherited some money from her mother. It might be some dream that she thinks she needs to participate in, when really she doesn't, because she would need to be free to go in another direction in her life. So be aware that those sorts of things that can show up and force you to do something that perhaps you really don't want to in this life of yours. Karma like that can show up in personal exchanges. You have this friend and suddenly you have to give her all your clothes you're not wearing anymore. Asur'Ana did this with one person that extorted her out of a lot of Hawaiian wear that she didn't wear anymore, and she gave it all to her because she extorted karma to receive it. Then there was another that came with blessings to receive the rest of it, so it all went away. So sometimes people can really get under your nails, so to speak, and extort things out of you that really you don't need to give away. And why that is and how that is in this society is very complex. And Asur'Ana didn't expect it. They spent time in her home and walked away with her clothes. It felt like a blessing to give it to them, but maybe it has something else for her to do later. So we can't explain it, but that can happen not just around possessions, but also around your bank book, because if people have access to your banking information, they could extort it. But it's more than that. It's that they need and they need and they need and they need, and they want to borrow from you. You have a little bit extra, so you write him a check for this amount, and they need always, and they never give back. And so the bank book isn't balanced. If you've given loans away and never had money come back from the individuals at cost, forgive them and let it go. And don't do it again, because those that can't generate have an intrinsic problem inside of them about their purpose. Those who can't generate enough for their life have an issue with their original purpose. As a seed, it's way off track, and then the dreams don't reformat to take them in a direction that's right for them. That's a hard thing when you're way off your existential purpose. If you are, and you've had a hard time generating what you need this lifetime, then it's time to have your purpose regrooved into your systems of transfusion, and see if you can't reinvent yourself to grow with your purpose and not in something else that wasn't right for you in this lifeline. So if they're a seed you've lent money to, it's probably that their purpose is off track. But in this society, when they want to borrow and borrow and borrow, they're in a circumstance of karmic fraud. And when they're in a karmic fraud, they never have enough, and so they always have to borrow, and it never levels out. Karmic fraud is a real problem for some people, so they pull karma in and they give it away before they have a chance to live it. And then they're always without. A certain percentage of the population ends up in that task of laundering karma, and then they never have enough. Asur'Ana recalls this character Johnny from Ireland, and there was Marla, his wife. Marla worked at Nordstrom's and made a lot of money. Johnny sat at home and drank coffee and cooked a lot and smoked a lot. He had lots of ideas, all these ideas from karma he laundered, which show up, and he had all these ideas of what he might do, and before he could ever begin to unfold the dream to do that, it was laundered someplace else. Asur'Ana thought he was entertaining and was kind of a pseudo-friend for a few years, but it was always the same story. And then their house burnt down due to something he had done to the wiring. They were living in this old apartment house above a business, and the whole thing burnt down. They did survive, but then everybody gave them things. They got new plates, new clothes, and a lot of it came from Nordstrom's. But he took or defrauded all this karma, that he surplused them with whatever they needed. The place was rebuilt and sparkled when it was done, and they were all the better. But that can happen in karmic fraud too. So be aware of people that need too much and give them what you can afford to give. If you can afford to give anything, even to the panhandlers on the street. Sometimes Per rolls down his window and gives them some money out of his wallet because he's told to by spirit, and most of the time not because he really recognizes that in this society there are probably karmic frauds that end up homeless and begging on the streets, and that's very sad to witness. Per was near a college town in Tucson, and there were all these young men, and that perhaps was part of a scam of maybe their school condition, and they were panhandling. He thought that was really strange because they didn't look particularly starving. Their hair had been recently cut and all that. Perhaps it was just a joke of some kind to see what it feels like to panhandle on the streets. And people were rolling down their windows and handing them ones and fives and tens and 20s, and Per thought, well, that's interesting. What are they doing here begging for something when they really don't need it? The odd thing about that kind of circumstance is it also was an existential fraud to do that to people if you don't really need it as a panhandler. So that's kind of weird, but if you ever end up without enough, asking for money is not wrong in existential purpose. So make sure to receive what you need and ask for what you need if you need it. And make sure that at some point you get yourself back on your feet to do what you need to do in order to provide for yourself, because that's a purposeful mission of any star seed always. Purpose has 4 concepts behind it. 1, that whatever you create takes care of your heart and fulfills you in your lifespan. That's a hard one with the current corporate environment or places people go and work, and it's really not where their heart desires to be much of the time, maybe ever. And so the purpose is one of fulfilling your heart. Now there is a way to align work into a place that you enjoy, with people you enjoy, and fostering something you like to do. if you can do that, then your purpose realigns. So if you are in a job or a circumstance that you don't like, you need to create one that you do, and that realigns your purpose for perhaps another change ahead. That's hard to explain, but that's true for all C's. You can't be in a circumstance where you hate your work and you hate the people you're working for and expect your purpose to flux forward. So you need to find something that you can enjoy doing, and there are lots of things that anyone can do it. For one initiate, she got a massage therapy license and then persevered in that direction. That can be true for anything that you might choose to study, and then go in that direction that you enjoy some, so that your purpose can realign. And then when your purpose realigns, it will generate another cause and effect, maybe to do something more true to your heart space. Asur'Ana loved psychic work. It was her passion, and eventually it realigned. So she could do that full time and be in her passion in everything she did, which led to her writings and teachings and all of these things you know about her. So once your purpose realigns in some kind of oligarchy job, another purpose may show up where you can do something that you really love and find passion for in this heart of yours. And that is what your purpose always is, which is to find what you're impassioned for and then go do it in a society that doesn't support that oddly enough. So you may have to do something else preceding that pays the bills until you can generate enough to something that you feel that you love the most. But the truth is that you can do many things. I mean, you may have the job and enjoy and love to travel. So your heart desires to travel, and you use the money that you generate to go see places on your holidays, and then somehow your heart's fulfilled. That's still considered purposeful to any starseed, or it may be another creative project you do on your days off. Perhaps even share some, maybe even find your way to making it a full-time means of making a living like Asur'Ana did with her psychic work. So whatever it is, the existential purpose often leads to a structure in which you're more self-employed out of the passion of your heart to do what you really believe in, and somehow that passion inspires others to participate in what you have to share, whether it's art or cooking or dance or something you're speaking to or writing or something else you have to give or offer unto others. existential purpose does arise that way as long as you're on track and whatever else you have to do to provide for yourself. The third thing we'll tell you about existential purpose is generally it delights others when you fulfill on it, because there's something in the springboard of fulfilling upon your purpose that catches as a system of something that inspires others. A purpose that's really inspirational will generally catch in the environments that enjoy that kind of circumstance. So if you can find a place to put your art or put your passion to work, whether it's an art fair or a church or a group or some other association, then your inspiration of what you create will catch amongst them, and the next thing you know is you have a journey to your own abundance. That's how existential purpose grows. You have to be impassioned about it or enlivened about whatever you create, and then it has an opportunity to springboard out towards others. Creativity can be endless in many artistic stores that are available with all these bees and goods and things to paint and create. And if you build a karmic system into it, you will always sell them. So fulfill upon that if you like creativity in your heart and mind, because there is something about it that is joyful under any light wave mind. So as you go to paint or whatever you do, you put yourself into a different mindset that says, I create and I create in the abundance of my heart, and I create in the fulfillment of an inspiration of myself, and I create to share this with another. If that's what you wish to do as a gift or something for you to be beautiful in. And so what we will say about that is existential purpose always has a passion and a love behind it that flourishes through whatever you do, and that love is catching upon others in this society that is learning to live with things that don't love them back anymore because they are not handmade. That's sad, but so it is. And so it is with most things, even seeds where are put around their home is very, very rarely handmade. Therefore, it may be your purposeful mission to create things to beautify your home that are handmade by you, or find them handmade by others, because that always has an inspiration in it that's in the undercurrent of a subliminal message to say, be in your purposeful mission. Anything handcrafted has that motion in it, even in this society, which is kind of art, but artisans are perhaps more purposeful in how they create than most others, musicians as well. And so what we're saying is purpose will arise out of creative objectives. Creative objectives can also be writing or counseling or being there for other people or being a chef. But if you think of a community organized system, all the things that would provide for that community is an existential purpose. Working for the corporate world isn't. And if you have to work for the corporate world, then it's very, very wise to have a creative project that's in your truth and mind on the side. And then your purpose will realign. If there's a way to make enough economy through something you're impassioned about and you create, then that can unfold too in a purposeful mission of a system within the seed to generate that kind of dream for you ahead. Purposeful missions can encompass many things, but generally they're fulfilling to the heart, that there's a sense of, oh geez, I've accomplished something really beautiful in this painting that I painted, or whatever I motioned, or whatever I did that was really fulfilling and beautiful for me to do. As it flows forward, then there's a sense of ingratiating you in this life of yours. Purpose always has to do with grace. Grace is a state of being where you feel blessed by Spirit and blessed by those associated with you, and you bless in return in grace and graciousness for what you received. So in purpose, there is always giving and receiving. And if you dance with people in a dream of care and giving and receiving, then purpose can unfold easier for you than before. So be aware of the need to give, be aware of the need to receive, and be aware of being in balance in how you give and receive with those you care for. If you create something for them, let them create something for you in return, and allow that to be beautiful, and then see what will unfold next. Purpose also has to do with how you relate to your family or spouses or people that you're close to. And existential purpose arises also around raising children. You've got children to raise. There's a purposeful mission that shows up that says, be there in the care space, in the sway space of your children when they're young and into their teenage years, and be purposeful to bless them and give them with those things that they need to find their purpose within as seeds or ceilings of your heart. And that purpose of parenting can take over the life for a time. In other societies, it generally carried on for about 9 years, that the mother or the father was the primary instrument of allowing that child to mature and understand their world. That was maybe all they did, and society provided everything else for them because they were in the existential purpose of the parent. And back not long ago, perhaps 1950, one income was enough, sometimes in Western societies, and the woman could stay home with the children. But if there's no existential purpose behind watching their minds grow or raising them, there can be a lot of frustration because they lost somehow a lot along the line the existential purpose of parenting. Most of you were probably raised by parents that didn't have any kind of purpose behind aiding you in your understanding of the world, and maybe were frustrated or had other problems in their lives, and you as a seed expected a parent with existential purpose to raise you. There's huge disappointment or pain or tears or a feeling of being non-fulfilled potentially in the way that you were raised. That's a good thing to forgive in the greater understanding this society has lost its existential purpose of raising children. And to forgive that because they don't know. Their genetics don't know how to do that in the way that a light wave mind society might do for children, giving them a launch pad of capability to express themselves or motion out in the world and fulfill upon their purpose. Next. There's a lot of shattered dreams and shattered hearts from the way this society parents their children, and in that, those shattered minds and hearts have a hard time launching their truth or launching any kind of purposeful mission to create something new. That's sad, and so forgive it and release the remaining programming, if you have any, for parents who weren't there to raise you in existential purpose. If you have young children, understand that's your role as a seed, but may or may not be of your spouse if they're not into it, or they don't have information on existential purpose of child rearing. That's hard to witness sometimes. If they injure your children and make them cry and whatever it is you're working on in relation to that, bless it and forgive it, and perhaps take the leading role for how your children are raised, because you're the star seed and your partner might not be. If they're a seedling, it's probably better. If not, maybe not. So understand that one existential purpose that always is there is to be the parent of a child, if that's your cause of existence in this world. If you've already raised your children, you may have been in your purpose and you may not have been. If not, forgive yourself, because perhaps the whole dream for it didn't ignite the way that might have if your star seed gave you of its own knowledge banks for that cause. Okay? Also, forgive your parents for not being in it either, because most likely they weren't. Asur'Ana's dad was a seedling. he would spend long hours talking to her about spiritual subjects that he felt were interesting, and it inspired her in many ways, even in her teenage years. The same was with Pear's dad, who was also a sealing. So sealings sometimes really get it and get some sort of feeling in themselves that they really need to be there in some way for their children. And she was lucky to have a parent that was there for her, even though her mother was emotionally imbalanced. So it was a little extreme, but so it goes sometimes in the polarity of the society. And so bless what was and forgive what wasn't well for you. And forgive yourself for maybe not being entirely well in how you parented, if you've parented, and be better in you. And let go of the programming associated so that you can be in a purposeful mission of whatever it is that needs to relate to family. So there is an existential mission to relate well in your family. Some of you leave them behind like Asur'Ana did and said, I don't really want to do that anymore. Some of you are faced with seeing them periodically because it's just the way the social network of your classes were. Now, if they're really detrimental to you, forgive them and let them go to the winds of time. And don't be near them again if you don't wish to. If you do, you probably may find something sweet or caring in them that you need to listen to or relate to. So, the existential purpose of kin is to be present and listen and be there for them, perhaps to advise or be there in a care position of family. That's existential, purposeful family dynamics. Now, family can extend into soul family, where you have others that feel like they're part of the family even when they aren't of the same bloodline. And the purposeful mission of that kind of kinship is to be present, be aware, listen, and to give and receive, and to share and support them through any kind of emotional crisis. That's purposeful mission of soul-family relations. Each of you have an opportunity to trigger these things in yourself as you meet people that fulfill your heart as a soul family member. Be open to that and allow it in your life. Allow your family to grow into its purposeful mission if you have children that you're raising, and experience the joy and beauty and grace of the seed system of existential purpose with them. Existential purpose can also extend to grandparents if their siblings, in particular, or mothers and fathers that are siblings in particular, and in that there could be a nice sway and love and care space that you share within that's very unusual, maybe with others. There's an unusual bond that occurs between kin of soul family and also with parents of soul family, like origins that are seeds or sealings, and the bond is forever, and the love is always there. And you know that no matter what happens, you can share, and that's true kinship. In the oligarchy society, sometimes ceilings can't be there after a certain cycle of lower fable that takes them away in a different direction, because they're so embalmed with the comic clauses of the lower fables. They can't retain the soul family bond to be present in the life after a certain time period. Asur'Ana had to fell out of her life like that after 2 years, exactly 2 years in the societal classes of That's Enough Soul Family, and that took them away in a different direction. That's very sad, but this society doesn't understand love much. They were both ceilings, but were embalmed with the societal classes and couldn't honor the kinship that they felt with Asur'Ana beyond that cycle. You can't really do anything about that sometimes, as they have a dream stream, or whatever they're doing in that, they have to go on their way. But sometimes it can be heart-wrenching unless you understand they just can't interplay any other way. They're too caught in the karma of society to do anything else. So let them go and find another, because generally when one kin like that falls apart, another one will show up, shut the door, open a window and go in a new direction. And don't be upset with the friends you may lose in your life. Strive to understand one another and speak your truth of your two C's relating to each other as friends. The C's are much more aware of many things than most others, as are ceilings, and that creates interesting discussions and nice share space and a lot of love sometimes that can be very magical. So be well with that as a purposeful mission, as a part of your existential truth to manifest soul family kin friendships or partnerships or family members through time. Purposeful mission also can have a statement of truth that whatever you create is destined to be shared and should be honored and accepted or received for whatever you've created. Sometimes in this society, there's a lot of disappointment when whatever you share or care about or create isn't very kindly accepted. There's a lot of criticism and negativity that flows through the mindset of these people that sometimes isn't there in C's, but sometimes it is also when life is disappointing and you can't find your inspiration or your passion to re-emerge and go in another direction so that your purpose can flourish again. But whatever it is, whatever you create, if there's negativity around it, understand it's just their mindset and you can't help their mindset. It is what it is. Bless them and let them go, and find others to share with that bear the respect and honor what you create, so that you can have a reciprocity. or some kind of flow back and forth of care for what you share. Because any purposeful mission of whatever you create, there should be care to and fro for whatever you share or give of yourself. And it shouldn't be a one-way street. In this society, there's a lot of one-way streets. You give and give and give of whatever you create or share, and nothing comes in return. And that can be very heart-wrenching if it catches up with your heart space over time. So make sure that there's a reciprocal return of care. If you give it out to whatever you share amongst those that are seeds or seedlings that can bless you back for whatever you give, and then your purposeful mission is fulfilled upon. Because for every purposeful mission, whatever you create or bloom or share, there needs to be care in return, because in seed society is love that has meaning and nothing else. It's not about money, it's about love. So if you give and you receive love back, there's fulfillment and it blossoms and there's no death. It often falls to the unconscious in our world not to love, and that the only thing that matters is money and paying the rent, which is very sad, which is a very sad statement of the truth of the people of this oligarchy society that missed it big, even in their guruships. That love is what matters, and not anything else. Love is what generates life. Love is what purifies light. Love is what creates the caress. Love is what gives you the central fulfillment of caring for what you do and what you share. Love is what causes a beautiful motion between two or many people to generate their heart space together, and that's what fulfills, and everything else is empty. You can't go to the mall and be fulfilled, can't go buy something and be fulfilled. You can cook some and share it with the nature kingdoms and perhaps be more fulfilled. But it's really people that love and sway that fulfill. And that's a purposeful mission for each star seed too in existential clause of let's be as one. That's where oneness theory comes in, to love and bless and be as one. And so your purposeful mission is fulfilled upon when you can cause that kind of experience with other seeds or seedlings in your life, to be purposefully caring with the people that you know, and then be better, be well, and out of that find the expansion of you to go do what you really want to do in this life of yours that's more fulfilling. We bless you for this information and for your understanding of the nature of karma, and for a path that chooses to transcend karma and go into another way of being, where everything aligns for you because you understand the system and you reinaugurate your original purpose clauses as a seed to be incarnate. And let your life rearrange in a new direction of something else you may discover and want to do and fulfill upon ahead. We bless you always. Namaste.